In this video, we will see some ways of factoring trinomials, more specifically quadratic equations.
Today we will start learning the greatest common factor, which is best known as the GCF. The example for today will be 4x squared plus 2x plus 6. In order to find the greatest common factor, we need to factor out each term. So 4x squared is equals to 2 times 2 times x times x. 2x is equals to 2 times x, and 6 is equals to 2 times 3. Now, based on our three terms, we can find the greatest common factor. For the first term, we have 2 times 2 times x, and the second one we have 2 times x, and the third one is 2 times 3. If you can notice, between the first, the second, and the third one, we have the 2 as common factor, and this 2 is the greatest common factor. Once we were able to find out the greatest common factor, we can factor out our trinomial by the 2. So if we factor, the trinomial will be the same as 2 times a remainder, which is 2x squared, plus 2 times a remainder, which is x, and 2 times the remainder, which is 3. Our final step will be check our product by distributing. 2 times 2x squared is equals to 4x squared. 2 times x is equals to 2x, and 2 times 3 is equals to 6.
The following is known as the grouping method. Let's start with the expression 6x squared minus 26x minus 20. Based on the previous example, we will first find the greatest common factor between 6x squared, negative 26x, and negative 20. The factors for the first term are 2 times 3 times x times x. The factors for the second term are 2 times negative 13 times x, and the factors for the last term are 2 times negative 10. As you can see, they all have a 2 in common, which means our GCF is 2. We can now rewrite the expression with the 2 factored out, and it will give us 2 3x squared minus 13x minus 10.
Once we factor out the trinomial by the greatest common factor, we will continue with the next step of grouping method. We will multiply the value for A times the value for C. Positive 3 times negative 10 is equals to negative 30. Now we need to find two numbers whose product is negative 30, but once we add these two numbers will be equals to negative 13, which is the B value. So now let's find out the factors for negative 30. So the factors for negative 30 are negative 2 times positive 15, or 2 times negative 15, 3 times negative 10, or negative 3 times 10. Consider the fact that we want to obtain the negative 13. I will pick up these two factors because negative 15 plus 2 is equals to negative 13, and negative 15 times 2 is equals to negative 30. On the following step, we will substitute the negative 13x with the factors we found, negative 15x and positive 2x. Now we will break the inner equation into two groups. We will factor the first group by the greatest common factor, which is 3x. And we factor the second group by the greatest common factor, which is positive 2. Once we had factored the two groups, we can identify the identical factor. And will we write down the identical factor just once? And will we combine whatever we have left as a factor? And don't forget to bring down the number 2. Therefore, our trinomial had been completely factored by the grouping method.
Finally, we will do the wheel method, which is just another way of visualizing your quadratic expression and its factors. Once you draw the wheel at the very top, you will write the product of A and C. On the sides will be your A coefficient, and at the bottom will be your B coefficient. For now, these two spaces will remain empty. And at the end, these two will be your factors. Before we start, keep in mind that the wheel method is usually used when A is equal to 1 and only when you have a quadratic expression. Let's start with the example 3x squared plus 15x plus 18. At first glance, we notice that our A is a 3 and not a 1. But we can factor out that 3 since it is the greatest common factor and end up with x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now we can do this in the wheel method. We draw our wheel and we get the product of our 1 and 6, which will just be 6. Then our A is just 1 and our B is 5. Now the same as in grouping, we will find factors of 6 that when added give us 5. The factors of 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3. When we check, 2 plus 3 equals 5, so we write those factors in the empty spaces. Usually, we don't write this down when doing the will method and do all the calculations in our head, but as you start with it, you can do side notes. Remember, we had stated these would be our factors, so we will write 1x plus 2 times 1x plus 3. And just remember to carry down our greatest common factor. You can check if our factoring was correct by doing the distributive property, and you should get this expression back.